It's 12 o'clock. It's Thursday. We are live. We are recording the event. So welcome everybody. We've got quite a few folks on. There's still some folks trickling in. Quite all right. Welcome to class number 2 for Learn to Hunt Deer Online. It is September 17th. This is number 2 of a 10-part webinar series. So we're going to be taking this all the way through to October 15th, right before the youth deer hunt season for this year. Thursday, September 17th, 2020. This is kind of a big deal because we are on hunting eve for archery opener. So the archery opener is Saturday. So, you know, the archers that are going out, I'm not going out on the opener, but I know a few folks are, and they are just, they're almost giddy. They can't wait to get out in the woods. Hunting is here, hunting is happening. And the whole point of this is that while hunting has already started, you know, our small game season kicks in really soon as well. You know, you still have plenty of time to get ready for the opening of firearm season for deer. You've got plenty of time to get out, find a spot. If you're uncomfortable or haven't really gotten dialed in with your chosen method of take, you still got plenty of time to do that. There's still a lot of weekends to get ready. So that's where we're at. So I'm going to kind of keep this as a similar sort of format as last time to try to make it as standardized as possible. Really quickly, I'm going to go over the agenda here. We're going to talk about who we are on this call. We're going to talk about a little bit about housekeeping for the webinar format. And then we're going to get into the content of this class. Class 1 and 2 are really kind of the background and context for the rest of the information that we're going to be presenting. So it's not quite the direct applied skills that people talk about when they go deer hunting, but it is kind of that broader information base that hopefully is informative and gives you a better context to know exactly how you plug into these sorts of activities and what that means. So today we're going to go over a little bit about deer biology and you know where the animals are and how they've been in Minnesota. We're going to go over some of the hunting history in Minnesota. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about hunting ethics and hunter ethics and behavior because that's very important to get that conversation going early in this process so that people know what's acceptable and what's not. And then we're going to have a quick overview about why hunting matters, both in Minnesota and nationally, so that we can get that bedrock of knowledge established and then build off of that and actually get into the discussions starting next week with the skills and the practical application of how to do this stuff. So that's where we're at today. Our goal remains the same for you as a participant and an audience member to learn about deer hunting, the rules and best practices to participate in a safe and ethical deer hunt this fall. Our first webinar was really focused on, you know, who is deer hunting for? It's for everybody. You know, you have the ability to do this stuff. You can get out there and get it done. And we're just here to try to give you a shortcut to get you some information that you might need to get pointed in the right direction. So really quickly, who are we? Well, I'll start because I'm talking at the moment. My name is James Burnham. I am the Hunting and Angling Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator for the state of Minnesota. Basically, my whole job is to get more people out hunting and fishing. And I'm a recent arrival to the state of Minnesota. I came here in December of 2017. Yep, it's only, that's what year it is. It's 2020 now. Yeah, so I'm still learning a lot about Minnesota. I'm still learning about where I can go as well. But with that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess. I'm Craig Kiger. I'm the state shooting sports coordinator. Been with the DNR for 15 years and been a deer hunter since I was 11 years old. Well, and set with my dad, and it's just an amazing opportunity to get out there the woods. The things you see, harvesting your deer is going to be exciting, but it's a really small part of that whole outdoor experience. So welcome to the group.
Excellent. And so one of the things that we're doing through the course of this webinar series, Craig and I are going to be here for all 10 webinars, but every episode, every webinar, we're going to have a guest speaker and participant and presenter. And today's guest presenter is Claire Galler. And Claire, I'll turn it over to you, and you can tell us who you are and what your story is.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Claire Galler, and I have, let's see, I've been hunting-ish on and off for about 5-6 years. Last year, I was able to participate in this Learn to Hunt program for my second time. My first time was in 2017, and Craig here was actually my mentor, which was fun. And then I took 2018 off and was fortunate enough to go do an antelope hunt out in Wyoming with my dad. And then 2019 went back to do this program again. I have yet to harvest a deer through no fault of the mentors in this program at all. At all. Each time I've learned a little bit more, and it's usually been something on my end that I need to work on, but that's a story for a different time. We'll save that for a different time. I'm still wrapping my head around calling myself a hunter. Like I said, it's been about 5-6 years. I grew up in a family out west in Wyoming with a dad that hunted everything. He was I don't ever remember not having a freezer full of elk or deer or moose or antelope or everything. But I had zero interest in it whatsoever. And maybe it was a thing with family does something, you want to do something different. But I had no interest until moved to Minnesota for college, got married, stuck around here, and then kind of started getting interested in some of the programs that the DNR was offering. And so I took advantage of a lot of the Becoming an Outdoorswoman programs. Started with pheasant hunting. I took advantage of the DNR's turkey hunt, went on a turkey hunt, and then kind of worked my way up to larger animals, I guess you could say. But like I said, I'm still wrapping my head around saying I'm a hunter. And I think where some of that comes from, and I'm always interested to see if other folks run into this too. When you first start, you spend, at least me, I spent a lot of time, looking online, looking into people that were kind of blogging about hunting and finding information about what kind of gear I needed, working in programs like this with great mentors that were willing to sit and chat and kind of go through their experiences and help me out, and go to the range with people that would show me the ropes when it came to shotguns and rifles, and try to wrap my head around all the different ammo decisions that were out there. And every time, I'm looking at these folks that are helping me out, and they are the hunters that I have in my mind. They're the folks that come hunting season, they're out all fall, and they're giving, it looks like they're giving 110%. And then I look at myself and I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I know I'm never going to be able to do that. I have 2 young kids. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 2.5-month-old right now. And I had to be able to find a balance of, I might only be able to go out and deer hunt one weekend. And if I don't get a deer, then I don't get a deer that year. And so a lot of what I've been working towards the last couple of years is coming up with my definition of a hunter and being okay with not giving 100%, knowing that that's not going to happen. And how do I balance it with having a husband that also has a lot of interest, that he's going to be gone doing his things, and having 2 small kids, and just figuring out that one weekend a year to try to get a deer is just going to have to it's just going to have to be enough. You know, when I did these 2 programs with the DNR in 2017, I had a 9-month-old, and the 2 nights, the long weekend I was away from her for this program was my first time away from her. And so it was learning kind of how to balance going hunting with also still being a mom. And then in 2019, I was pregnant with my daughter, and that was a whole different experience of knowing, again, I couldn't give 100% and kind of having to rely on some other folks that could help out. And so a lot of my experience into hunting has just been kind of coming up with my definition of what hunting is for me and what it means to be a hunter. And so I would hope that everybody that's starting into this, you know, you don't kind of dive in thinking you have to give 100%. You have to buy the right gear. You have to spend all, you know, summer and early fall scouting. You have to give yourself all over to it, because you don't, and you can kind of find that balance that works for you. Like this year, I don't think I'm going to be able to get out, and so hopefully that's just kind of banking up and doing the work I can do at home, so that next year it could be a bigger experience for me. So that's a little bit on my background, and like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions or kind of share any more stories of you know, what it's like to kind of work yourself up into that mentality of being a hunter, whatever definition that is for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. Yeah, and for the participants that are on the call, you know, this is your one and only chance to have a Q&A with Claire. Craig and I are going to be here all for the remaining 4.5 weeks. So, you know, now's the time to engage with Claire on her experience and her perspective on these things. And then, you know, I'm already seeing a couple things come in the chat that, you know, somebody's got a very similar situation to you, Claire. Their kids are 3.5 and 16 months. So it's a lot to juggle. I mean, hunting by itself is a lot to juggle. There's a lot of time that can be difficult to do, but as you get into it, you know, my experience has been that it's also really easy to incorporate it into things that you're already doing. You know, when I take my kiddo for a walk in the woods and I'm scanning for deer or turkey sign, I'm looking at where possible oaks could be, or, you know, I'm constantly looking at the habitat, and it just kind of plugs into something. You know, I'm not out there to scout per se, but it's just something that I do as I'm out there in the woods, because it gives me an opportunity to possibly find a new spot or set up on things. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that too. You know, my husband doesn't really have any interest in hunting. He's very supportive and kind of helping me gear up and helping me out at the range. But then when it comes, you know, the weekend to go out, he's sending me out. And so I look at my 2 daughters now and I go, well, there's some possibilities that I could help them grow into a hunting buddy for me down the future. You know, like I said, I had a dad that didn't push me into this, and I think I found it on my own. And so I hope I can do something similar with my 2 girls, and maybe we can just leave dad at home and kind of have our own thing that we can do together. So I'm looking at it as kind of an advantage of having little kids that maybe will one day grow up and want to do this with me, but who knows?
Yep. Awesome. Well, let's move on down the trail. Speaking of trails, just a quick reminder of the housekeeping for how the webinar is going to work. I'm very big on, and I'm going to be a little bit briefer about this than the first one. This webinar is basically an overview of what's required to do this sort of stuff. It's very highly focused on Minnesota. It's a summary of some of the stuff that we're going over. It's an opportunity for you to hear a variety of voices like Claire's. Last class we had Azalea, and these are voices that are from very new to sort of new to very experienced. So it just gives you a chance to engage with a variety of voices. It's a question for you to ask questions about deer hunting, and hopefully it's a shortcut to get you on the right path moving forward. This is not a substitute for you spending time in the woods or at the shooting range. You know, those are activities that are you're going to need to do. And unfortunately, in the time that we exist right now, we're not able to be there in person, one-on-one, to help you along that path. But if you have questions about where to find those types of resources or find people that could help you, please let us know, and we'll try to point you in the right direction of organizations or individuals that may be out there. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. And also, in terms of really quick, in terms of housekeeping for the webinar, if you do have questions in WebEx, you know, on the right side of the screen, there's a Q&A area. Let's get all the questions into the Q&A. The chat is great. We see it I see it as it goes by, but it's a lot easier for us to navigate that Q&A if you have specific questions that you are looking to get answered, because I can scroll through that Q&A a lot easier and quicker than the chat, and that's just a feature. That's just a quirk of WebEx. So let's direct the questions, the specific questions, to the Q&A. If there's other stuff that you need to give us an alert about, like our audio is not working or somebody's muted or something, go ahead and stick that in the chat. But let's have those questions in the Q&A. All right, deer. What's a deer? Oh dear, what is it? White-tailed deer. They are widely distributed across eastern North America, but they do spread out into the west, and they go all the way down to South America. You know, they're a very widespread animal. They are really a creature of habitat transition. They really like a lot of variety on the landscape. They like having a range of options. They really do well in that mix of woods and fields and water. That's really what they're honing in on. They're most active at dusk and dawn. I mean, anybody who's been driving around in the evenings knows, you know, you see those critters on the sides of the roads, and they're just kind of standing there munching away, and they always make me nervous. The males are typically between 100 and 300 pounds. The females are a little smaller than that. You know, males shed their antlers annually. For a lot of hunters, that's just common knowledge, but for a lot of folks who are just coming to this and have no idea, you know, sometimes that's a surprise that they actually do shed those antlers, and they regrow them every year. They breed in the fall, in October, November, so that's coming right up. And then they have this little quirk about them, along with a lot of other animals, that they tend to be bigger in the northern latitudes. So growing up down south in Georgia, my deer down there were a lot smaller than the deer that we've got up here. So in fact, going back down there, I've seen some pretty mature bucks that are down along the coast of Georgia that just, at this point, I think they look like big Labradors. They look small. I've gotten spoiled by the big deer up here. This is an approximation of what the annual cycle for a deer is. You know, in the dead of winter, you know, late December, January, February, the males are dropping their antlers, so they no longer need those antlers, so they're dropping them off. And then, but pretty quickly, almost right away, in a lot of instances, they start regrowing new antlers. And those, you know, the older the deer, the bigger the antler. Antler growth tends to max out somewhere around between 4 and 5. Now, there's variability within populations, so you know, this is all just a rough representation of how this stuff is happening. And then the males spend the rest of the summer growing those antlers. You know, right around May, June, fawns tend to be born by the does, and then as we go through summer, you know, the fawns start off. They can walk when they're born, but they tend to be, you know, the females will plant them in a spot, and then, you know, when they're first born, and then they'll go off and feed, and they'll come back and they'll nurse the fawns, and they'll move to a new spot, and they'll repeat that cycle throughout the day and through the first couple of weeks. And after, you know, 10 days, 2 weeks, you know, those fawns are really mobile, and they can keep up with mama, and they don't need to be plopped in one spot and left there. If you've been out hiking in the woods or in the fields, you know, it's not all that uncommon to come across a fawn who's just totally hunkered down in that May, June timeframe with their little spots, and they will not move until you're right upon them. So that's their defense mechanism, is just to be hidden. In the late summer, early fall, the males, the antlers right now, a lot of the antlers, the way antlers grow, they're covered by a growing tissue that's fuzzy, and they call it velvet. And those velvet antlers, when they're done growing, the deer will, it's a vascularized tissue, the velvet is, and the deer will actually rub it off. And so then you get that bright polished horn, but for like a day, maybe 3 days, you'll actually have deer running around with bloody antlers and velvet hanging off of them, and they look kind of like they're out of a horror movie, but it's just them shedding that vascularized tissue to expose the horn underneath the ossified antler. And then they go into a pre-rut, and pre-rut, the rut itself is when the males are just running around. They're trying to breed with does. They're really trying to get as much breeding done as possible. They're highly mobile. They're a lot more mobile during the day. And thankfully in Minnesota, that coincides with the firearms deer hunt. So, and that's intentional. But before that happens, you have a pre-rut where there's a social hierarchy that's being established by the deer. Subdominant males are being kicked out and expelled from groups, and the big dominant males are right now, they're just kind of sitting pretty, and they're gaining as much calories as they can. Because during the rut, they're not going to be eating very much at all. They're going to be fighting. They're going to be chasing does. They're going to be staking out their territory. So that's typically what happens. And then after the rut, there's a lot of breeding that happens. The males are done fighting, and then after that, it's just they're hunkering down and they're trying to survive the winter. Historically, prior to European settlement, deer were kind of really restricted to the southern, 2/3 of the state. And, in the north woods, in the big woods, it was moose and caribou. And, down in the south and central, you had deer and elk. And then in the northwest, you had elk going up into Canada. And those patterns followed the ecological provinces or biomes that are located across Minnesota. So that northern third of the state is that mixed forest, the Laurentian, the pine woods, the big pine woods. And then there's this transition zone between those big pine woods and the prairies in the southwest. And that's that eastern broadleaf deciduous forest that comes in. And that eastern broadleaf was really kind of the sweet spot for deer, because it was that transition between habitat types. You had a variety of habitats that were there. And those eastern broadleaf forests produced a lot of great food. It produced apples, it produced acorns, it produced a lot of fruiting trees. And they can get by on pine needles and lichens, but acorns and crab apples are a lot more nutritious and easier to digest. So that's really kind of what their historic sweet spot was. As European settlers came in, they completely changed what the landscape looked like. They also hunted the heck out of everything. I mean, you had to put meat on the table. It wasn't just sustenance; it was providing for the family. It was a career. It was market hunting. You could kill a lot of animals and send them to a meat packer and get paid for it. So it really kind of, as the pines were cut, as the cutover happened, and as farming came in and European settlers spread out across Minnesota, it kind of pushed everything north, right? It kind of pushed everything north into those big woods. And by 1920, deer were really kind of pushed up into an area where historically that had been moose and caribou. And the southern part of the state, they really had been pushed out of. People had pushed them out. There'd been a lot of hunting, and they weren't very common in the lower part of the state. And we're still dealing with that. We're still dealing with the legacies of that. I mean, 1920, that's when my grandfather was born. There were a lot of traditions that developed of heading up to the north woods to go deer hunting because that's where they were. And those traditions remain today. And but the funny thing is that when you look at where the harvest numbers are these days, it's reverted back to where that transition zone historically was. the densest number of harvest is kind of right in that diagonal line going across the state where the broadleaf ecological province exists. And you've got a lot of folks that, because when their dads were little or their grandfathers were little, they were going up north to hunt deer because that's where they're at. They still do it, but the deer have kind of come back down as those woods have recovered. Those woods have gotten bigger, they've gotten thicker. They're a lot more homogeneous than they used to be back in the early and mid part of the 20th century. And so those deer have come back down to where there's more of a patchwork landscape of croplands and fields and water and forests. And folks are driving right past them. And it happens in Minnesota, it happens in Wisconsin. You go up to the Northwoods because that's where what you've done, and that's where the shack is, and that's where the family's been for generations. But they drive right past the densest deer densities in the state. This is going to continue to change through time. Forests are not a static thing. Deer populations are not a static thing. This is going to be something that is constantly responding and evolving as time goes on and land use changes and forest types change. This is going to be something that continues to change as we move forward in time. So what affects that distribution? There are three big things that really drive that. You've got habitat, so that's food, shelter, and water. And I've already talked a lot about that patchwork mosaic of, some fields, some agriculture, some forest, and some water. That's really a huge part of it. How severe our winters here are in Minnesota is another big part of it. Growing up down south, we didn't have to worry about winter severity, but up here, it actually it makes a big difference. And winter severity is a metric that's calculated from depth of snow and air temperature over a certain amount of period. So the deeper the snow and the colder it is, that's harder for deer to deal with. So once snow gets above 18 inches, it's harder for them to get down through it and get to the plants that they need underneath the snow layer to survive. So this is a map of the winter severity for last winter, so from November 2019 to April 2020. And this is we had a relatively mild winter. The one prior to last winter, that those purple shades came all the way down to the metro. And this is available online at the DNR. You can see that website and you could just do a search for winter severity index on the DNR website and get to these. And you can see how that changes over time. This affects a tremendous amount. Once that winter severity gets above a certain threshold, usually around the mid 100, 130, 150 range, that's a problem for deer. And so, when you see those dark purples coming all the way down south to the metro, it's going to be an issue for deer to survive the winter. And then the other big thing that drives distribution are predators. And by far and away, humans are the biggest predators of deer, either directly through hunting or indirectly through car strikes, hitting them with their cars. We take out more deer than anything else out there. After us, it's a depending on where you are in the state, the number one predator could be a bear, it could be a coyote, it could be a bobcat, it could be wolves. But none of them do near as much damage to deer populations as people do. And yet we're still seeing an increase in the overall herd size. Getting into regulated deer hunting over the last more than 100 years. So that graph in the top left, that shows firearm license sales from 1918 to 2014. And you can see there's a handful of times where those license sales go down to zero, and that's because there was no season that year. The deer herd couldn't take it, they couldn't handle it. And the last time that happened was in 1971. Craig was around to remember it. I was not. But since the 1970s, we've kind of committed to a certain framework for setting our season limits and our management. And it's been managed fairly well since then. And so we haven't had to cancel a season in my lifetime, and hopefully we won't have to moving forward. The deer harvest doesn't quite match what the deer license sales are. So, it's a pretty good indicator that, there may be a bunch of folks out there, but they're not necessarily getting the deer that they want to get. So there's a lot of variability in what the harvest is from year to year, and that again is driven year to year. It's primarily driven by that winter severity and the predation in the local area. The land cover change, that's a little bit more of a multi-year process to drive that distribution. But yeah, so that's what it's looked like. And you can see where there's been no firearm sales, there's been no deer harvest because there was no season. This is a little bit more recent history over the last 20 years. You can see that there was kind of a peak of harvest in the early aughts. In 2003, we kind of reached our max of almost 300,000 deer harvested, and that includes firearms, archery, and muzzleloader. And then we kind of saw this decline through the late aughts and into the teens, and especially that 2010, 2011, 2012 era. Those are some really bad winters. I mean, 2012 was that polar vortex. I was down in Wisconsin at the time, and it was minus 40. People were throwing boiling water into the air and watching it come down as snow. And that was a rough couple winters, and it coincided with, those years of big harvest to kind of give a 1-2 punch into the population. And so we saw a really big decline in 2014, and the population's been recovering since then. Last year harvests were down a little bit, and that was kind of a weird little fluky thing where it was a really wet fall, and there was a lot of corn left standing all over the state. And when corn is standing, the deer don't have to go anywhere. They can just hunker down in those cornfields. It's like you're living in a buffet bar, and you don't have to go anywhere. You've got food all around you. You're sheltered from the wind. Hunters can't see you. Why would you leave, right? So the number, the predation, the harvest numbers for 2019 were down a little bit. It was really bad in Wisconsin, but they had the same problem. There was just corn standing everywhere because farmers couldn't get into the fields. So, there's every year there seems to be like some quirky thing, like, oh, it's the coldest opener that we've had in 20 years, and so hunters weren't out opening morning, and harvest was depressed, or there was a freak fog. So local conditions can drive a lot of those harvest numbers, especially for the opener. This is just a really quick overview of how many hunters we've got out there for firearms hunters and archery hunters over the last 8 or 9 years. Excuse me. And when we look at firearms hunters as of 2018, about 8.8% of the state was firearms deer hunting. That's the whole population of the state, and that's over twice the national average. Our archery hunters, it's a much smaller group, but they're a very dedicated group, and they are out there. And I tell you right now, they're going to be out there over the weekend in the woods trying to get a deer. So that's, we've got most of our hunters are dominated by males. As of the most recent data, that was about 86%, but we have seen a really good growth in women hunting from 2010. So that's been tremendous to see. What hunting means for Minnesota, and this is all hunting. This isn't just deer hunting, but we've got nearly 500,000 people that are hunting in Minnesota each year. Now, most of that is deer hunting, and most of that is firearms deer hunting, right? So we've got about, that last slide, we had about 400,000 folks that were out. So we've got another 100,000 folks that are small game hunting and waterfowl hunting and turkey hunting. And all of that totals up to about 5.5 million days spent hunting in the state of Minnesota. And that contributes to tens of thousands of jobs, over $700 million that goes yearly for spending in Minnesota. And that's, $93 million in state taxes for Minnesota and $106 million in federal taxes. There are a lot of communities that are up north or in rural Minnesota that, they live for opening fishing weekend and opening deer weekend, because there's a huge influx of hunters and fish and anglers that are driving those economies. And all of this comes from an organization called huntingworksforminnesota.com that spend a lot of time quantifying what that economic input is. So I kind of want to transition into the conversation that I want to have with Claire and Craig about hunting ethics and behavior. When you're coming into hunting as a new hunter, it can be kind of hard to know, what are we supposed to do, what's right, quote unquote, and what's wrong. And there's a lot there's a lot to digest, because there are official rules that we're all supposed to follow, and if we don't follow and we get caught, we might pay a fine, or if it's severe enough, they could confiscate our equipment. And then there are unofficial rules that we're supposed to follow and learn from the people that teach us. But when we don't grow up in a community or with a family that does this stuff, those unwritten rules, those expectations, they just, nobody tells us, right? There's nobody there to tell you when you're trying to learn this stuff on your own. So we're going to get into this a little bit. This is one of my favorite quotes by Aldo Leopold. And if you're not familiar with Aldo Leopold, please look him up. He's a tremendous writer. He's a fantastic scientist. But the quote here, and I'm not going to read it to you because you can read it yourself. We, as hunters, we follow the rules, and it's not like there's somebody sitting there going, no, you're doing it wrong. No, you're doing it wrong. If we're doing it wrong, we're the only ones that often know it. So it's on us to be respectful and ethical and responsible hunters. Now I'm using hunters as a single term, but hunters are not a monolithic entity. There's a range of behaviors that are out there. There are a range of unwritten rules. Growing up down south, the deer season down there was 4 months long. So our unwritten rules were a lot different than they are up here. People have different practices in different areas, and different hunters behave different ways. Hunters are responsible for themselves and each other. If you're with a group and you see somebody doing something wrong and you feel like you have a relationship with that person where you can call them out, do it. And if you're in the woods and you see somebody doing something that they blatantly should not be doing, if they're illegally poaching somebody, there's a turn-in poachers line that you can call anonymously with the DNR and let it be known, hey, I saw this. I've reported multiple deer stands that I found on public land that aren't supposed to be there. I don't know who put them up, but as a hunter, it's my responsibility to make sure that the deer herd is being protected, that it's my responsibility to make sure that public land is being respected. And if somebody's driving in stakes and screw-in steps and building permanent stuff where they shouldn't be building it, I'm going to report it, because that's not cool. That's not what's supposed to happen. And be the hunt. And finally, all of this really boils down to, you get to be the hunter that you want to be in the woods. You get to be the hunter that you want to encounter in the woods. Like if you're new to this and you have no idea how you're supposed to act to other hunters or to the land or to what's around you, be the person that you would want to see coming down the trail. Help somebody else out. If they're dragging a deer and they look like they're struggling, give them a hand. If somebody needs a granola bar, give them a granola bar. Pick up litter. Just be the kind of person that you would want to encounter in the woods as you move forward with this stuff. So what is an ethical hunter? Well, it's somebody who follows the hunting rules and regulations, and it's also someone who follows the local rules. Different landowners have different rules for how they manage their property and how they hunt their deer. I know some landowners who they will not let me shoot a buck no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's a giant trophy. They let me on their property under the strict rule that, James, no bucks for you. Those are family. We're going to let the family go after that, or we're going to let the first-time hunters go after that, or we're going to, it doesn't matter. I just have to sit there and go, yeah, okay, I won't shoot a buck. So just be aware of what those landowner rules are. It can be accessing certain areas of the property. Certain landowners will cut off an entire section of the property just so the deer have a refuge to go to and they're not getting harassed. Just follow what they say. And if you have questions, ask them, hey, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I do that? Be respectful of their property. Make sure you close any gates that are closed when you get there. And don't drive your truck across a freshly plowed field, because that's just rude. So respect those landowners and respect their rules. There's a concept out there called fair chase, and it's set up by a bunch of different principles, but it basically comes down to this is the sporting, for lack of a better word, way to pursue wild game, and a lot of that comes down to you don't seek an inappropriate advantage. You always give the the quarry that you're pursuing a way out. You don't want to just, no shooting fish in a barrel. Like that's not good. That's not ethical way to do it. It's on you to get the skills that you need to secure a quick and humane harvest, to make sure that you can get an animal with the area that you're at and with the equipment that you've got, that you can get it done and get it done quickly. And that's on you. Respect the animals, respect the land, and respect other hunters. These animals, they have a right to be there without you at all coming into their lives. And so when they're not there for you to harass, they're not there for you to mistreat, they're not there for you to take a bad shot and risk wounding them and compromising their quality of life down the road. And I know that sounds weird when we're talking about shooting an animal to kill it, right, to harvest it. But you owe it to that animal that you can put it down as quickly as possible, as humanely as possible, so that it's not suffering, so that you don't have to worry about where it went. And you have to put harvested game to good use. Use every bit of it that you can. That's just what you owe it to that animal. And in our first class, Azalea talked about that. One of the big things that she came to out of respect for that animal, if she, as a vegetarian, as a self-proclaimed vegetarian, she said that she owed it to that animal that if she was going to harvest it, she was going to eat it. And that's a good step to take. You owe it to that animal to treat it, to use it as much as possible, not waste what you've taken off the land. So that's what an ethical hunter is. That's kind of a definition of an ethical hunter. So what can you do to be an ethical hunter? My big rule, number one, is don't be a jerk. It's not worth it, and it goes a long way towards making you an ethical hunter. I come from a big camping background. Leave no trace. Leave things better than you found them. Pick up trash. I always walk out of the woods with my cargo pockets stuffed with shells or trash or water bottles or beer cans that I find in the woods. Get confident with your chosen method of take. If it's a bow, if it's a gun, get comfortable with it. The more comfortable you're with it, the less you have to think about for making a good shot. If you have to sit there and be like, how do I put the safety on? Where's the scope cover? Know if it clicks or squeaks or makes a noise in a certain way that you use it, because the deer are going to hear it and it's going to take away your opportunity for a shot. So get comfortable with what you're going to use. That's one of the biggest things that you can do. Know your maximum range and stick to it. If you're only good with a bow to 20 yards, stick to 20 yards. If that deer comes in at 25, let it go. It's not worth making a bad shot. It's not worth you being outside your comfort zone and having that thought process in your head, oh, what if I miss? Right? You don't want that thought, because that thought's going to make you miss. You want to know, I'm good to here. I'm comfortable to here. I can get it at here and put it down. A big thing that you can do is just share your experience, share the stories of how this stuff happened, and share the harvest. If you get an animal on the ground and you get a lot of meat in the freezer, share it with friends, share it with family, and let them know how you got it. And then again, respect the wildlife, respect the land, and respect the rules. Don't trespass. We talked about that in the first one. It's a really big thing. And some of the unwritten rules, I'm a big fan of talking first with people. Like if I see somebody in the parking lot, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to say kind of the area where I'm going. That's a great way for you to be safe. You don't want to wind up on top of somebody else while they're hunting. And it's a great way for them, if you need help, you can identify where that is. At 3 a.m. and it's dark and everybody's got guns, that's kind of an intimidating process, but it's a really good thing for you to do, to just be like, hey, I was going to head up to that field, and they may tell you, oh, we've already got a guy going that way, or yeah, go ahead, good luck. Typically on public land in the woods, whoever gets there first gets the spot. That's sometimes dicey, because you've got some folks that can walk in and be like, well, we've been hunting this spot for 30 years and you're in my spot. and you had no idea, right? Like you just didn't know. It's public land. But the general rule of thumb is whoever gets there first gets the spot. When you realize that you're coming up on somebody, just stop and back out. Don't walk under somebody's stand. Don't walk underneath. Don't walk right past where somebody's hunting. Don't walk in between them and whatever they've got going on. Just stop, back out, and go find somewhere else. And when in doubt, if it's a dicey situation, if it's sketchy, just de-escalate and leave. None of this is worth getting into an argument about. None of this is worth getting territorial about. None of this is worth getting into a fight about. So that's that. And we're others see what you do. They see the good, they see the bad, especially in the woods. And these days online, pictures, people circulate stuff on social media all the time, and there's some sketchy stuff that's out there. And you don't want to be taking pictures that people can take out of context or not understand why you're doing what this is. So just be aware of that, be cognizant of it, be careful about it. And again, be the hunter that you want to encounter in the woods. Craig and Claire, do y'all have anything to add to that?
I really believe the things that James are saying. With over 45 years of deer hunting experience, that's the way I was taught to deer hunt, and it's the way I try to teach others to deer hunt. Be respectful of the land, the people that are using it, and the animals that live on it, and pass up those questionable shots, and take a good solid shot, and utilize everything you can from that animal.
Yeah, and I think that's one of our kind of benefits as new hunters that we can bring to the hunting community is, we're taking the time right now to learn the rules, learn the regulations, hear from mentors that want to continue a good tradition of hunting, and so we can kind of infuse the good ethics and the good behaviors going forward. And so I think that's a benefit that we as new hunters bring. We're not coming with family history of this is how we've done it forever and this is how we're going to do it, that we have a clean slate that we can work from.
Very nice. We are, these things just fly by. We are rapidly approaching our Q&A period. And I have other stuff that I want to talk about. So this is going to be very, very quick. You may not be in this for this reason, but hunting pays for a lot of conservation in North America. It fuels the North American model of wildlife conservation or management, and I'll get into that in just a second. And that's done directly through license sales to state agencies, or taxes on hunting and fishing equipment, or directly through a federal system through stamp purchases. And what that means is you literally buy a little stamp and it's supposed to go on your license. And the money from that has been used to put aside over 6 million acres of land into protected status. The tagline for this class is become an active participant in your outdoors. And on one level, that means like getting out into the woods, actively becoming part of that life cycle in the woods, taking an animal from the field and putting it on your table. But for you to do that, you have to buy gear, you have to buy a license, you have to buy equipment. And that also makes you an active participant in your outdoors, because now you are actually paying for the conservation of wildlands and wildlife in North America. So that's the license that you buy, the management for the game, for wildlife and land area in the state, all of that management, and this is a little bit dated at this point, so it may not be exactly these numbers, but well over 90% of the money that goes for that comes from those license fees. So, all the wildlife management areas, all the deer, a lot of the deer health stuff that we do, a lot of the fish stocking that we do, it's coming from those license fees. So without those licenses, we don't have that ability to do this stuff. And, the breakdown of what a license gets you, for every dollar, about a little under a third goes to fisheries, a little under a third goes to wildlife, a little under a third goes to conservation officers, and then the rest of it's split up among some other factors. But you know, you are fueling the ability for the state to manage and maintain these places. At a federal level, whenever you buy gear or equipment, you pay taxes on that gear and equipment, and that goes directly to the IRS and is administered by the Fish and Wildlife Service through the Wildlife Restoration Act. This is done through two articles of legislation. It's the Pittman-Robertson Act of 1937 and the Dingell-Johnson Act of 1950. And money comes into that pot, and then it's allocated back out to states based on land and inland water area, license sales, and population. So the more license sales that you have, the more your allocation goes up. The more land and inland water area you have, the more your allocation goes up. So this is really the foundation of a principle called user pays, user benefits. You know, you pay into the system, and then you benefit from having clean water, manage wildlife populations, and an ability to hunt in these areas. And it's all the underpinning of the North American model of wildlife management. You know, this is how game and non-game species are conserved across North America. It's a direct response to what happened in the 19th century when wildlife populations were completely decimated and wiped out. And that was championed by hunters and, again, that sportsman's term, to do this. They saw, you know, with the loss and the extinction of the passenger pigeon, it was really the writing on the wall that, hey, we can't just shoot everything. We have to actually start policing and managing ourselves. And that was defined through multiple acts of legislation through the 20th century. And that's a picture of Pelican Island, the very first piece of land that was set aside specifically for wildlife use. And that's right off the coast of Florida. There are 7 big tenets. I'm not going to get into these really all that much, because if you want to Google the North American model of conservation, you're totally able to do that. But really quickly, wildlife's a public resource. Game markets are eliminated, so you can't just wholesale sell stuff. There's an allocation of wildlife by law, and that's a democratic process. If we don't like the laws, we can change them. Wildlife can only be killed for a legitimate purpose. They're an international resource. Migratory waterfowl are managed at the international level between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. All of this management is based on science, and it's accessible to all. It's not my deer, it's our deer. So, you know, these are principles that are not all that common everywhere around the world. And really quickly, because I do want to get to the questions and answers, and I apologize that we're going over a little bit. Since 1936, over $20 billion have gone towards wildlife conservation and management. That's a lot of money for wildlife and wild places. And it's directly linked to the recovery of multiple game and non-game species, the bald eagle, the American alligator, and you know, white-tailed deer, turkey, elk, and all of this activity and all of these efforts are a major reason why this is the good old days for deer hunting, for turkey hunting. Like, there's more deer on the landscape than there's been in 150 years. Now, I know there are local pockets where they're just not there, but you know, if we look at a landscape level, you know, we're living in a really good time to be doing this stuff, and it's because of what's happened with the North American model of wildlife management. So with that being said, I want to get into some of these questions. And so Craig and Claire, I've done a lot of talking on this one, and I apologize for that, but I do want to get folks time for questions. And Craig has been answering some of the questions in the sidebar. One of the questions for Claire that we've got, what changed your interest in it? And I'm assuming it is hunting. And how did you find it on your own? How did you find hunting on your own?
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, that's a great question, and one I was thinking about a lot. I think for me, when I started with shotguns. I enjoy shotgun shooting a little bit more than rifle shooting, and when I finally had a gun that fit well and that I could easily hold and easily maneuver, then I kind of went, okay, this is kind of neat. This is kind of fun. And I was able to do more like trap shooting and skeet shooting. And then from there I went, okay, what else can I do? And that's when I took advantage of Becoming an Outdoorswoman programs. And they had a pheasant hunt day where you did some some practice shooting, and then you were able to go out into the field. And I don't consider myself super outdoorsy. You know, I'm not really camper. I'm not really, you know, I don't really cross country ski. We don't do a lot of that. But walking around southern Minnesota in some of those open prairies looking for pheasant, it was so enjoyable. You know, I'm a big fan of that type of landscape, and I went, okay, this might be my way. This might be my way to be connected with the outdoors. And then it kind of continued to spiral from there, the turkey and deer, like I said. So a big part for me in kind of growing as a hunter was finding gear that worked well. And it's taken a while. You know, I'm still working towards that, and it's trying out. You know, my husband has a shotgun that's huge and doesn't work well for me, and I used that for a while and went, this isn't fun. I don't like it. And then finally found one that fit. So kind of, like I said, working up towards that, and having hunting be my way of kind of connecting with the outdoors when nothing else kind of checked those boxes.
Nice. Really quick, yes, these are being recorded. We are going to be posting the recordings as soon as we can get them up online. It's going to take a little bit of time. We've got to take them down, process them, and get them put back up. So hopefully by the end of next week, we'll have the first 2 or 3 recordings up, and then moving along in that pattern after that. Kind of moving down through some of the stuff. Craig's answered a lot of these. Claire's answered a couple.
I can jump in with one of the ones on kind of finding mentors and folks willing to take people out. One area that I've had luck with, besides programs like this, like I think the DNR, Becoming an Outdoors Woman, there's a lot of resources within there. Like one, you know, just one program can kind of spiral out into more connections, right? I also had luck. I had never been duck hunting before, and I reached out to, I think James Craig, is it Ducks Unlimited? Why am I blanking on that? One of the kind of the, you know, the groups around a lot of the duck hunting. And I emailed the president of the chapter in my neighborhood and said, hey, I've never been duck hunting. I really want to go. Is there anyone that might be willing to take me out? And he said yes, and he took me out that season to give duck hunting a try. And it was nice because, you know, he kind of had everything set up. And so I didn't have to go, you know, totally in the dark with it, that I was able to kind of piggyback off his interest. There's also a couple chapters of like Pheasants Forever within the Metro that I think a lot are doing online meeting, but for me, it was doing a lot of scouting online of different organizations that, and then just reaching out and seeing if there was somebody that may be interested in helping. I didn't specifically ask for a mentor, but just asked if someone was interested in helping a new hunter, and would hope that kind of connections would build from there.
Yeah, and that's a really great tip. You know, reaching out to those groups have a lot of them have really dedicated hunters or anglers, and you know, there's a subset of that group that, you know, all they want to do is teach other people how to do this stuff. So reaching out to the specific organizations like Pheasants Forever, like National Wild Turkey Federation, Minnesota Deer Hunters, Bluffland Whitetails. There's a lot of groups that are out there, and we have a list of that on our DNR webpage in our Learn to Hunt content material. So if you just Googled Minnesota DNR Learn to Hunt, it'll take you to our landing page, and you can get down to some of the organizations that are available there. Just saw a quick question about trespassing. Can I? Yep, Craig answered that. Get permission if you can. Yeah, it's always best to have permission. That's for sure. And you can go across a property line without a firearm if you are trying to retrieve game. But if somebody asks you to leave, you have to leave right away, regardless of whether you get it. So let me see. Justin found it more difficult to start hunting with a rifle here in Finland, but hunting with a bow had a more inclusive community, it seemed. That that tracks with some of the stuff that I've seen. Bow hunters, like I said, they're a smaller population. They're a smaller number. They tend to be a little tighter knit. They tend to want to have somebody out there with them. So that doesn't surprise me, and it matches some of the stuff that I've seen here stateside as well. So. Well, we are at the 1 o'clock mark. If there are any other questions, I'm going to take a quick look in the chat just to make sure we haven't missed anything. But if you've got to take off, I really appreciate you coming on and having us joining us for this. We are going to be continuing to have these Tuesdays, Thursdays for the next 4 weeks. Let me see. And so we're going to be having guest speakers for each of those. Starting next week, we are going to be getting into kind of the direct applied skill sets that we're going to be looking at. We're going to talk a little bit about ecology, which is an extension of the biology that we just went over, how those deer are moving across the landscape, how do you find where they're at, and use the cues that's on the landscape to find them. And we're also going to address a little bit about, considerations when you're hunting for food. What kind of gear or equipment do you need to use, and what do you need to be aware of as you're moving forward? And I'm just kind of really quickly going through the chat. There's a great comment in here from another Claire about armed walks for rabbits. Yeah, just that's a great way to think about it. Whenever I go pheasant hunting, I just call it taking my shotgun for a walk because I'm not that great of a pheasant hunter. And we do have our guest speakers filled up. But if anybody wants to reach out to me and let me know if they've got other contacts, I'm happy to take their names. There was a question directly for Claire in the chat. Was your first hunt on public land? If so, what kind? Was it a WMA? Was it a state park?
Oh, that's a good question. Some of it was through some of those programs, and so I was able to piggyback off of, I think one was at a bird farm, one of the pheasant hunts. Otherwise, I've done a lot of public land. And then I've done some private land that I've just gone up and knocked on a door or two and asked if I could turkey hunt in their area. Had a really good experience with that. So it's been a little bit of a mixture. Some public land, some private land, and some kind of bird farms too.
Nice. Just a couple more questions here in the chat. I giggled coming from North Carolina. I was shocked at how big Minnesota deer are. Yeah, they're noticeably bigger. A suggestion for a rifle range near the metro. There are a few. I'm not sure what their operating status is right now, so I would follow up with them. There's the South St. Paul Rod and Gun Club. There's the Forest Lake Sportsman's Club. There's a couple of others that are out there, but those are probably the two that I'm aware of that are closest to the metro that I've seen have public shooting. The biggest thing that I would recommend would be to do a quick Google search for rifle range near the metro, and a lot of them come up. At the DNR, we don't really house that information in terms of a map or anything that I could point you to, unfortunately. Rachel, hey, thanks for watching our turkey webinar. I know scent is a big deal. Do free and clear detergents work? They're sure, yeah, they'll work. Avoiding perfume scents are a good idea. I'm not as rigid about scent control as I know some other hunters are. I use detergent and scent-free laundry anyway because I'm a delicate flower. I have sensitive skin. I can't take it. It's a good idea for deer. If you set up and you keep the wind in your face, you could stink to high heaven and it won't matter. As long as that wind is in your face and the deer are in front of you, they're not going to be able to smell you. So, it's the nose, and we'll get into this into the ecology next week. Their nose is their biggest asset, so they will scent you and they will run if they smell you. But you can play the wind card and not have to be so dedicated about how bad you smell or how wonderful you smell. Let me see. I think we just had one come in. Tony, thank you for the update. South St. Paul is fully operating and actually has more public shooting hours than last year. Awesome. Bald Eagle. I forgot about Bald Eagle. I apologize. They're a great place. I'm not thinking very quickly off the top of my head. Bald Eagle in Hugo is another good shooting range. They have limited public hours. Forest Lake is normally closed to the public. And you're correct that that's what I was thinking about. They typically have hunter sight-in days leading up to the gun opener. So that typically happens in the second half in October. So those are three ranges to check out and to get out and to get some shooting done. So thank you for that heads up, Tony. Appreciate that. And Nathan says he used wheretoshoot.org to find a range. Awesome tip. Thank you. Jeff, thank you for the shout out to Claire. Yeah. And all right. And I think Craig answered that last question. So, all right, we are 7 minutes over. Thank you everybody for attending. It's awesome to see the interest. I'm going to close this down. If you leave the event, there is a survey that you're going to be directed to. Please fill that out. It helps us. It helps inform us on whether this is information that you want to know, whether we conveyed it accurately, and just gives us more details. Please keep an eye out for if you go back to how you registered for this event. That's where we're going to be putting up the recorded videos. Please keep an eye on for that starting next week. So thank you very much. We're going to see y'all Tuesday. Claire, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of this. It's tremendous to hear your story. It's tremendous to see your face and hear your voice. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Fun to see so many numbers on the call. So many folks calling in.
Excellent. Greg, good to see you again. And we'll see everybody next week. And Craig, did you have anything to say?
I think I typed all my words out. So
okay.
Apologies for any typos in there, but I tried to get to everybody's questions. If you go to the Learn to Hunt webpage, you can find email address for James or I, and send us an email. We'll try and get the right answer back to you as quickly as we can.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Be good. Enjoy the woods. If you're going out for archery opener, good luck, good skill, and we'll talk to y'all on Tuesday. Thank you.